So, I wrote a book. Yeah, it's been out for a couple months now. I kind of forgot to talk about it because I've been very busy with work, YouTube, Twitch, and then this at the beginning of the year. The entire premise is it's a mythological fantasy series following the events or following the life of a boy named Gaius who becomes immortal and then isn't able to be seen by any of the other gods. So the bigger danger to the gods is who is he and why can't they find him? If that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find it off Amazon. And to celebrate, again, a little bit late, it's been out since April, and it's now what? August, ideally, when this video goes up. I want to discuss what I think are the 10 coolest fantasy and mythological weapons. Fantasy might be the wrong word here. I'm looking more for stuff like that appears in mythology and folklore, not stuff that appears in like J.R.R. Tolkien or Robert Jordan or anything from Brandon Sanderson, simply because, again, mythology is what gave me a big inspiration for this book, and I want to celebrate that. I love mythology, and I haven't discussed it much on this channel. I think the only other mythology video I have is my mythological kaiju video, which, if you haven't seen, go watch. I recommend it a lot. Today's video is going to be a discussion of my 10 favorite mythological weapons, and let's dive in with what the first one is. So the first weapon for today's topic, it's obviously gotta be Excalibur, right? Like, Excalibur is probably the biggest known magical mythological weapon in the world. I don't think it's what started the trope of, like, the sword and the stone or the one true king weapons or anything like that, but I definitely think it's the most well-known of it, right? Like, everyone knows Excalibur worldwide. I don't think it's unfair to say Excalibur is probably the most popular fantasy sword of all time. When it comes to depictions of Excalibur, you've obviously got a lot of them. You've got more classic versions, you've got more anime versions, but my personal favorite version of Excalibur, it's very uncommon to see, but it's the variation where it's clearly being wielded by someone who isn't the chosen one, so they're still using it in the stone. Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow has a weapon like this. The scene from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, where Jack Horner pulls it out of the bag and it's still got the rock attached to it, it's hilarious. Like, I've seen it a lot, I've seen it thrown around a lot online. It's really funny. It doesn't really get talked about a lot, and I would love to see, like, some more interesting takes on it like that. Of course, I've also spent some time workshopping my own personal variation of Excalibur for a different story that wound up getting shelved. Maybe I'll revisit the idea in the future. I don't know. It was like my own telling of the King Arthur legend and the Arthur's Knights story. But that's a topic for, like, maybe a different video. So let's move on to the second weapon to talk about today. So the second weapon up for discussion today is Shoror. I think that's how it's pronounced. The talking sentient mace wielded by the Sumerian god of war, Ninurta, I believe is how it's supposed to be pronounced. This is probably the oldest example of the talking magic weapon trope. It's from Sumerian mythology, which is probably one of the oldest known mythologies alive, or still, like, being studied today. While it may not be as well known as certain other weapons, I definitely wanted to include it on this list because I think overall it's just really funny. I love talking magic weapons, be it a sentient sword who talks shit when you swing it, a gun who talks shit when you shoot. Like, it's just fun. Like, everyone loves a good talking weapon. It doesn't have a lot of powers. It can levitate, it can talk, and then it can turn into a winged lion, which is pretty bog standard compared to, like, some of the more later mythological weapons that you see. I just wanted to give it a shout out because, again, this might be the earliest example of talking magic weapons we have. So let's move on to the third one on the list. From one blunt magic weapon to another, let's move to Norse mythology, which has no shortage of magic weapons. Probably the most named magic weapons of any mythology. And you knew what it was as soon as I said Norse, didn't you? It's pretty fucking obvious it's going to be Mjolnir, right? Like, I wanted to pull a sneak and be like, no, it's actually Gungnir, Odin's spear, or it's Gram, the Dragon Slayer sword. But if it's Norse mythology, it's fucking Mjolnir. right? Like, we all want to swing this fucking hammer and hit something with it, because it's so fucking cool. This is specifically the God of War Ragnarok variation from the collector's edition, which you can't see now because I have it set up behind the camera, but I got like the whole shrine thing for it when God of War Ragnarok released. I was very excited for that game, and I love this little hammer model we got for it. It's very cool. But Mjolnir, when you think of Norse mythology, it's the first magic weapon that comes to your mind, right? Like, there's no way around it. I would love to be like, oh no, it's Gungnir because it's really cool, or oh, it's Freyr sword because it's sentient and can fight on its own, or any of the other magic weapons in Norse mythology, but the simple answer is it's just Mjolnir. Mjolnir is iconic, partially because of Thor from, MCU and comics and whatnot, and partially just because the imagery of Thor in actual mythology wielding this fucking hammer and just striking shit down with it is fucking world famous. It's very cool. I love that there's actually a canonical reason why it's so short in the mythology itself, because Loki fucked up the forging process of it to try and win a bet, and then still failed, losing the bet. Like, I love that so much. And then you've got, like, obviously MCU Thor has the whole worthiness element, which is what people like to tout. But if you look in the actual mythology, it's about power, right? Like, in order to wield it in the actual mythology, it's basically like having a nuclear bomb in your freaking hand. You don't want to give just anyone access to nuclear launch codes. I'm leaving this pause so you can sit on what I just said. But, you definitely want the right person to do it. And Thor, being one of the most powerful gods in Norse mythology, definitely has what it takes to wield this thing. And that's why it's so cool, is because it fills out that power fantasy thing. Like, swords are sick, right? Like, everyone loves a good sword, right? Like, look at this thing here. I hope that didn't just pick up. Look at this sword here. This is so cool. Everyone loves a good sword, right? Everyone loves a good sword. But the simple fact of the matter is, when it comes to mythology, Mjolnir is probably the one that everyone would want to wield, right? I don't think too many people would want to wield Excalibur and deal with the hassle of that. But everyone would want the power of Mjolnir in their hands. Next up is one of my favorite mythological characters of all time's weapon, the Ryujingu Bong, Sun Wukong's staff from Journey to the West and various other stories that he's in. It can change shape at will. It can change size at will. I believe the exact conversion, I might be wrong on this, so don't take my word as gospel on this, but the exact weight conversion, if I remember correctly, is 17,550 tons, and he's just out here swinging that thing the fuck around. Now, I have a deep love for staff-based combat, polearm-based combat, because it's very fun, it's very fluid, it's very fast, right? Like, you see movies where a martial arts wielder is using a staff, and it's very interesting to watch his moves, because you never know when the next attack's coming in, where the next attack's going to be coming from. Imagine if you had the ability to extend the staff's length or shorten it at will to catch your opponent off guard. It would be so much fun to do. The weight alone, one hit's gonna kill them. Like, let's be real. That's fucking insane. Like, that's crazy weight. Strong shit. But, like I said, I can't decide if this is just a really cool weapon, because it is, or if it's a really cool weapon because it's attached to a really cool character or mythological being. Sun Wukong is amazing. I love Sun Wukong, but I also really love his weapon. It is so much fun to just see it in action, watch it be used, read it be used, and it's probably my favorite staff in all of mythology. So next up on the list, we're going to stick with the Eastern cultures, and we're going to look at the sword Kusanagi from Japanese folklore and mythology. Kusanagi is the magic sword of the Japanese emperors, passed down to them by Amaterasu, and it has the ability to control the wind, which is pretty cool. It's probably the originator of, like, the magic slashes, you know, the stuff like Virgil throws out, or, Link from Legend of Zelda, you know, the sword blade techniques. Maybe it's not, maybe there's other ones, but I feel like kind of how, like, Sun Wukong is the originator of shonen manga, I think that Kusanagi is probably the originator of that trope. And I really like Kusanagi. I think it's a really cool sword. Obviously, the fact that it's an actual real sword is pretty cool. We don't actually know what it looks like or what the current state of it is. The fact that it's passed from emperor to emperor is really fascinating, and the fact that it's one of the 5 like legendary relics of Japan is also really cool. I really doubt that it's actually magical and control the wind. That's probably just stories that got passed down over the years. But overall, magic swords, they're iconic for a reason. Kusanagi may not be Excalibur, but it is still a really cool, really fascinating sword. And I genuinely do like it, and I would probably want to have it over Excalibur, if I'm being honest. Excalibur, while magic and iconic and dictating who the true king of England is, doesn't let you control the wind, does not let you cut grass with wind with it. So it would probably be less cool to have as an actual sword. So next up is a little bit more of a difficult one to talk about because it's not really a mythological weapon, it's more of a religious weapon, and even then it's never stated to have like any super abilities or anything like that. But it's the spear of Longinus, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's the spear that pierced the side of Christ when he was on the cross. My reasoning for putting this on the list is pretty simple. It's an interesting idea for a weapon. Like, we see it gets used a lot. Like, there's a lot of different variations, different like versions of it. It's an interesting element to like certain stories. Ultimately, I think it gets up here because of the iconicness that's put on it by different material like Evangelion, more than its actual merit on its own, because it's never really utilized as an actual weapon. It's just, while Christ was hanging on the spear, someone stabbed him in the side with, or while Christ was hanging on the cross, someone stabbed him in the side with a spear. It's interesting because, like I said, that's kind of where the story ends. I mean, obviously, if you look a little bit deeper into like Christian beliefs, stories, you know, stuff like that, you can find more about what happened to the guy who was wielding it. But the spear itself just kind of peters out a little bit. It's not really ever referenced or anything like that. It's not super powered. It's not anything like that. It's, you know, just a spear. I don't remember where, but I remember vividly reading some story or like watching some video where someone tried to tie the spear of Longinus together with the spear Rhongomyniad that gets used by King Arthur. I think that's an interesting idea. I don't think if I would do that if I was writing a you know, Arthurian legend story. But overall, like, this is just kind of a interesting situation because where stuff like Excalibur, Kusanagi, Ryujin Gubong, they're famous because of what they are in the actual folklore and mythology. The Spear of Longinus is more famous because of what was put on it in extraneous material more than what actually was put on it by like Christian beliefs and other things like that. So it's a really interesting case study for a magical weapon. Next up is a spear of true, genuinely terrifying proportions, the Gaebolg, the legendary spear of Cuchulainn. It's made from the bone of a sea monster. What it does is horrifying. So you stab your opponent with it, and then it like produces thorns and barbs that just go through the body, the human body. It's described as infecting going through the highway or the high passes and bypasses of the human body, or highways, byways, whatever, the human body, and filling every joint and crevice with thorns and barbs. That sounds fucking terrifying. Like, holy crap. That also sounds really freaking cool. I don't ever think I'd want to use it because I don't want to have to clean up that mess, because apparently the only way to get the spear back is to remove the flesh from the spear, which that's one hell of an image to put in your head. But overall, I definitely think that it's a really cool weapon. Irish mythology is unfortunately victim to a lot of erasure and rewriting as a result of just what happened to the Irish people in general, which is not something I'm equipped to discuss on this channel. I am not a history major or a person who studies history like that. My understanding is that Christianity wound up rewriting a lot of Irish mythology several times, kind of destroying their gods, destroying their heroes, destroying their belief systems, and that's why Irish mythology is kind of significantly lesser known than stuff like Greek, Norse, Egyptian, Roman, those variations of mythology. And it's honestly genuinely sad. I really think that if we still had some more sources, we could have a lot more interesting magic weapons from Irish mythology. Obviously, there are more than just the Guybulg that we know about, but the Guybulg is kind of my favorite. Completely impractical weapon because holy crap, that mess would be a monster to clean up. Really freaking cool. It feels like something that an edgy 13-year-old would come up with in a sci-fi or a fantasy series that somebody would absolutely like buy and then talk shit about on the internet. It's just really cool really cool idea for a weapon. Overall, like I said, I love spears. A lot of spears are really cool. A lot of pole arms are really cool. And when you've got something like this, yeah, it's pretty freaking epic. Next up is the trident wielded by the Hindu god Shiva, known as Trishula. And it is, as far as I can tell, a trident. It doesn't have many magical powers. I'm actually not super versed in Hinduism. It's something I would love to get into. I honestly just kind of wanted to give a shout out to Hinduism because their epic poem, the Mahabharata, is one of the biggest and most studied mythological works of all time, right up there with something like Dante's Inferno, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and obviously Journey to the West. I don't really have much to speak on with this because from what research I have done into this weapon, it looks like most of it just is symbolic. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of powers. If someone who is more versed in Hindu mythology understands that there are powers behind it, they can and they would be happy to educate me properly in the comments. That would be fantastic. But beyond that, I think we should move on to the next one. So next up is Shemesh's Radiant Axe, wielded by both the Mesopotamian god Shemesh, and more importantly, the hero of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh himself. Probably the oldest standing recorded magical weapon in history. And it has the powers of glowing with radiant light and just cleaving through anything in its path. Pretty simple, all things considered, but given that it's the earliest standing example we have, most likely, I think that it's very, safe to say they weren't working with like katanas that can slice through dimensions or arrows that can fire hundreds of thousands of themselves with one shot. Like we have a lot more stuff nowadays than they did back then. So we're kind of used to more weird shit now. Overall, though, I think this weapon's pretty cool. You don't see a lot of magic axes in mythology, which is interesting. I believe the only other one I can think of is wielded by a Slavic god, and it's overall just pretty cool. It's an interesting weapon. It's wielded by the oldest hero we know of in human culture, Gilgamesh. So I had to give it a shout out somewhere in one of these videos on some kind of list I was doing. And the last mythological weapon I want to talk about today is actually not one I'm a big fan of, but I feel like it still deserved a shout out. It's earned its merits despite my personal opinions on it. It's Durandal from French folklore and mythology, wielded by the paladin Roland. Overall, I'm not a big fan of this weapon personally because it just kind of feels like a knockoff Excalibur. It's indestructible. It can cleave through boulders, and it was wielded by a great hero during a great epic. While it doesn't describe who the true king of France is the way Excalibur would, it doesn't really... It's not something I'm a big fan of, personally. Now, I do understand that the paladins of France oftentimes get associated with, like, the Knights of the Round Table, and very often there's overlap. I do, like I said, respect the sword for at least being, like, its own thing. It doesn't... Roland's not leading France because he pulled it out of a stone or anything like that. Plus, if I were to judge every single weapon for being, like, unoriginal, there'd be nothing to fucking judge beyond the fucking axe on this list, okay? So, I think this is an alright weapon. I think that it's pretty interesting. It gets used a lot in a bunch of different video games and different media that I've seen. And overall, I don't think it's quite as bad as I personally think it is because, again, I just have a bias. I really like Excalibur. It's one of my favorite swords. It's just of all time. And this sword does tend to feel like a little bit of a knockoff, but I also understand that it's definitely not really a knockoff. So it's just a personal thing for me to just kind of be a hater, I guess. It's still bringing up on this list. I want to give it a shout out. So there you guys have it. That is 10 of my favorite mythological weapons of all time. If you want a copy of my book, I'll leave it linked down below in the description. This probably isn't going to be the only mythology-based video I do. I don't want to turn this into like a whole mythology channel. I do love mythology. I have some really cool ideas to talk about with it. So if you want to stick tuned for that, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.